Well, I was asked to come and talk a little bit about the medical examiner's office. We're one of those county offices that nobody ever wants to come and meet, but unfortunately, we get a lot of people that do. First, going to start with a little bit about the role of the medical examiner's office. Medical examiner's office is created by statute, and there we go. Um, First of all, medical examiner versus coroner. There is no standard for death investigation in the United States. It's about broken into thirds between coroner states, medical examiner states, and mixed states. Missouri is a mixed state. The class one counties have a medical examiner, or when they become class one, opt out of it and retain a coroner. There are multiple class one counties that have opted to retain a coroner. Coroner is cheaper, kind of. Depends on how many autopsies they do. Coroner, um, basically, you have to be 21, live in the state for a year. If you want to run for coroner in Taney County, you have to live in Taney County for 6 months, but you have to live in Missouri for a year. That's qualification right now. There's a state senator down in Cape Girardeau. They had some things go on a few years ago. He proposed legislation and it didn't pass last time, but he's ready to propose it again to actually have some requirements for education for coroners to be able to run for coroner. He wants them to have at least EMT or nursing training to be able to run for coroner. So there's some basic medical knowledge. Right now, there is a 1-day seminar for new coroners, basically just telling them, this is how you fill out a death certificate. This is what you're supposed to do by statute, and go. You're on your own. And there's an annual training, which is 24 hours of training, which the Coroner Association has undergone a lot of changes to. The state 6 years ago mandated a coroner and medical examiner training standards committee at the state level. That committee finally got enough people appointed this year. They started meeting in early 2024 or late 2023. They still don't have a full board. They still have not. And I don't know what the thing is in Jefferson City, but they're just dragging their feet and not appointing people to that commission. That training commission also then is trying to work towards getting all the elected coroners up to a basic level of death investigation training. Medical examiner is not elected. They're hired by the county, an appointed medical examiner. They work at the county government will, but they have to be a licensed physician and preferably a forensic pathologist. Right now, all of the medical examiners in Missouri, as far as I know, are forensic pathologists. There are, with that being said, basically St. Louis and then the counties surrounding St. Louis. St. Louis City has their own medical examiner. The other counties have a regional office. Kansas City covers several counties, and Columbia and Boone and Callaway County up there in Columbia have a medical examiner based at the university, which we know well because we worked with them for 9 years, worked for them for 9 years. And then we have Greene County here. There are, out of all the counties in Missouri, I think there are 13 medical examiner counties. Some of those contract with other offices to provide their medical examiner services. That's another thing in the statute. More than one county can share the forensic pathologist and share the office. They employ clerks, investigators, autopsy assistants, and that's where I come in and where our other full-time folks come in, other than Dr. Duff, who is a forensic pathologist. Well, anybody know this guy? He's back in reruns once in a while, but that was people's image of forensic pathology and of medical examiners. He would bring people in, and we still have police officers come to autopsies. We have EMT, paramedic, nursing students come to autopsies. We have a deal with Fort Leonard Wood. Their investigative class for their military police investigations course there, they all come and observe autopsies with us. So we do have quite a few people come and attend. When we designed the morgue, we did not want a dark room with just the surgical light. So we have lots of natural light, so we don't have to do that. We never had anybody pass out in like 20 years, never had anybody pass out in an autopsy. And then we had a certain pathologist come in, and all of a sudden, people were passing out. I don't know. This is just an old picture. The coroner office, which all of this derived from, established in the 1200s, and the Crown did not want to miss out on any funds. So they appointed the crowner, which when somebody died, a knight and clerk and other people to help them carry the loot went out and investigated the death. And if it's anything other than natural, then all their possessions went to the king. So that's where the office came from. Coroner statute, medical examiner statute are a little bit different, but that's kind of boring. Everything we do goes by statute. The basic differences in medical examiner and coroner: coroners, if the sheriff needs to be arrested and taken out of office, the coroner outranks the sheriff, so the coroner can do that. In medical examiner counties, we don't do that. We're not elected coroners, so that goes to the prosecuting attorney. So if Dan shows up over at the sheriff's office one morning, he's the only one that can arrest the sheriff in a medical examiner county. I don't see that happening, but then again, sometimes that pops up in little counties that take you by surprise. There was a coroner who was in his 80s. He was actually in the nursing home, and his wife would pick him up, take him out to the scenes, and drive as close as she could so he could look out the window. He actually was the sheriff for a few days until they could appoint a sheriff, because their sheriff got into some stuff and got arrested and taken out of office. So their 80-year-old coroner was the sheriff, and that's happened in a few other counties in the last several years, but that won't happen here. Let's go to the other PowerPoint. We'll talk about some more current stuff. A little bit about our office and how we're structured. Dr. Duff is a licensed forensic pathologist. He is our medical examiner, appointed by the commission to be their medical examiner. We do have another forensic pathologist who works. She comes in about a week every other month just to give Dr. Duff a break. And because of our name accreditation, which we'll get to in a little bit, forensic pathologists are only supposed to do up to 200 to 250 cases a year, and we're doing more than that. So having a second pathologist come in for those breaks that workload up enough to meet the name standards. Chief Forensic Investigator, that's me. Forensic Investigator 2 is Mike. He's our other full-time investigator. So the two of us split up the weekdays and just take call during the week, Monday through Friday, from 6 until 5:30, or 6 until 5. And then we have Teresa, our administrative assistant. And Mackenzie is our autopsy assistant forensic technician. She is responsible for helping with autopsies, getting bodies ready, getting them prepared for autopsy and then prepared to go to the funeral home, um, keeping stuff stocked and cleaned in the back. Those are all her responsibilities as the autopsy assistant. We have part-time staff. We have 5 part-time positions. We have 4 filled right now. We have increased our standard for people to apply for that to kind of go with what's coming up with the coroner standards and the Medical Examiner Coroner Association. So all of our people right now have either EMT, paramedic, or nursing background. And so we've included that now because that's really what we want. Death investigation, law enforcement goes out and investigates deaths. And in the media, they always say, and the police determined, well, the police go to a death investigation to determine if a crime was committed. And if so, who may have committed that crime. The coroner medical examiner goes to that. We do a separate parallel investigation, and we are looking for why did this person die? We're looking for what can we find to help determine the cause and manner of death. Death certificates have 5 manners, and it's natural, accident, homicide, suicide, or undetermined. Then cause of death is what process, what physiological process caused that death to occur. That can be heart disease that caused a heart attack. That can be a stroke because they had long-term hypertension, or drug use, or gunshot wounds, or whatever event caused the death to occur. And I know a lot of times you'll just see the cause of death was homicide. Well, no, that's the manner of death. They're 2 separate things, but our part-time staff, we have 2 death investigator 1s, which is our entry level. We train people, we send them to trainings, we do in-house training. Then within 2 years, they have to be certified by the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigation. That is a national group that certifies training courses that meet the standards for death investigation. And then you have to keep track of all the hours, all the investigations somebody does when they're first hired. And then once they have done a certain number of investigations with someone and then on their own, and then taken a sufficient number, they have to have at least 40-hour basic death investigation training. Then they are eligible to apply for the examination. And once they apply for the examination, everything's reviewed, and then they can sit for the exam. They go to, right now, we've been sending to OTC. They have to have a proctor there. They send the exam, the proctor times it and watches it. And then once they pass that, they are certified at the basic diplomat level. And then you have to have 3 or 4 years at that level. And then you are eligible, and you have to have a minimum of an associate's degree. You can apply to take the board certification exam. And that is another, you have to have recommendation letters from multiple agencies and people. That's another 8-hour exam, 5-hour written exam, and then 3 hours for practical exam after that. So that's really pretty intense. And I think out of the 20 listed in Missouri, half of them are retired now. And there's only a few of us that are board certified. And then there are quite a few diplomat level for the registry. And we don't push real hard for everybody to get board certified. It'd be nice, but that is basically our pay structure to get elevated from Death Investigator 1 to Death Investigator 2 is they have to obtain that certification, and then they move up a level. And it's the same with the full-time staff. Level 2, they're certified, and then level 3 would be board certified. So that's how we can move up. But our part-timers cover nights and weekends when they're available. When they're not, then Mike and I cover nights and weekends too. And sometimes, like yesterday, Mike was on call, but couldn't find a babysitter. So then he called me. And so between buying stone and going to Menards, I went and picked up a body and went to a scene. So always keep extra stuff here to change into to go out to scenes if you have to. We received name accreditation this year, and we have, when we designed the facility, it was designed to adhere to all the name standards. Accreditation standards were developed and they update them every several years. Dr. Duff and I just went to the name annual meeting in Denver, and every year NAME is an organization for forensic pathologists and investigators and other medical examiner staff. There were 675 people at the meeting in Denver, I believe, which is really good considering there's only 500 and some forensic pathologists in the country. Most of them try to attend that. And then they're networking. But NAME is a peer organization, and part of the annual meeting is people present ideas of this standard should be changed and this is why. And then after everybody's had time to review that, at the next meeting, that'll be voted on to see if they want to change those standards. But NAME sets the standards for autopsies. They set the standard for medical examiner offices and workloads and all of that. For accreditation, it took us from the time we decided we're doing this and started on the checklist. The checklist has over 300 items, and that is everything from policies, procedures, the staffing, facility, and the workload for the forensic pathologists and everybody. And then there's an on-site inspection after all of the checklist data is turned in. It's all reviewed. We sent photos of everything facility-wise on the checklist, and we were given full accreditation. You can have up to 10 deficiencies. We didn't have any. I'm not sure how, because our back lot's not fenced, and that was a new criteria they had added a couple of years ago. But we're working towards that. We're going to have some bake sales, and after we pay for our last card reader with a bake sale, we'll work on the fence. But they give us full accreditation. So there are 87 accredited offices, and that's in the country. And I think a couple of those are actually in other countries. And then Jackson County in Missouri is the only other county that's accredited by name. So we're pretty proud of that. Took several years to work through the process, but they gave us full accreditation. And so that puts us in a pretty small minority of offices in the country. All right. And I just had some 5 full-time and 4 part-time people. These numbers, and then we're always going through these. I used to always put these together, and we switched. Teresa does these now, but we figured out one thing this morning, that there's one category that doesn't show on here. Overall, the numbers stay pretty stable. 2021, there's a big jump, but we know why that was. With COVID, we were taking sometimes 20 calls a day from the hospitals. Both hospitals report all deaths to us, and the natural hospital death that we don't sign the death certificate or anything isn't reflected on here, and that's another couple thousand calls a year. I know I looked so far for this year. Um, we've had 1,386 so far in 24 hospital deaths that are natural that aren't reflected on the overall reported deaths. But the reported deaths is all the calls that we get, and that is deaths that are unattended outside the hospital. That is any death in a nursing home, any death on hospice. Those are all required to be reported to us. We have to review those. And it seems like every week we find 3 or 4 that had some type of an accident, they had some type of an injury that led to their death, that without those being reported, those were all being missed. So I think that was 2018, somewhere in there, that the state said all of those have to be reported to coroner, medical examiner. So that bumped our workload up back then. But you can see that homicides, 2020 we had a lot, 2021 we had even more, and then it's kind of slowed down. Right now we're back in that cycle of 1 a week, which doesn't go the whole year, or our numbers would be a lot higher. But for the first probably 15 years I was here, we averaged 4 to 6 a year. And so that number's gone up a lot, but not overwhelmingly so. Our suicide deaths, it seems like we should have so many more. We have 2 or 3 a week, it seems like. But when we do the annual numbers, there are those weeks where we don't have any. So it doesn't bring it up that far. We had 79 in 2022, and that was the high of the last 4 years. And accidents stay pretty stable between 140 and 225 in 2022. It seems like there should be more of those too, because we have them all the time. Not this last weekend, the weekend before we had 3 here in town, and just it's always. But and then the natural deaths down there are the autopsy deaths, and undetermined. We try not to sign anything undetermined, although that's another thing with name standards, is more deaths are undetermined because infant deaths used to just be called SIDS, which essentially is undetermined, but it was a syndrome, and so therefore it was a natural death, and so all of those were signed as natural. Now most of those are signed as undetermined, just because there are a lot of factors. Sleeping on your stomach, sleeping with a lot of stuff in the environment, those all can contribute. But now at the NAME meeting, there were a couple papers on research of probably some of those are undiagnosed seizure disorders, and you have to have a first seizure. And babies can have a seizure, even a febrile seizure, if they're in an environment where they're prone to not getting as much oxygen anyway with a lot of bedding. A seizure could push them over that. So it's constantly evolving, but we have more undetermined now. Drug deaths are always a big thing. We have a lot here in Greene County. The number actually went down. In 2022, we hit a high of 165 overdose deaths. And that is a lot for Springfield. That's like 0.5 in 1,000 people that die of an overdose in Greene County. So that's quite a few. And motor vehicle deaths, they've gone up a little. And I think part of that is speeds, and just when you drive around, you notice people don't pay attention to any traffic rules anymore. And so traffic fatalities have gone back up the last few years. Um, let's see, getting to time here. So we did look at overdoses, and everybody knows about fentanyl. Back in 2020 or 2003, so 21 years ago, I did a paper on oxycodone, and it was the worst thing ever. Oxycodone was going to kill everybody. And so they stopped prescribing oxycodone to most people. And surprise, they prescribed more and more fentanyl, and people got used to fentanyl. And now we used to see all the fentanyl patches, and they'd scrape off the patch and melt it and inhale it or inject it, or just chew the patch like a gummy bear and die with the patch still in their mouth sometimes, because there's so much fentanyl in there and it's so potent, people don't understand. Now, most all of it comes from out of the country, and it's cheap to make, and they're importing it just as fast as they can. And methamphetamine, we used to go out on calls and have meth labs every week. I haven't seen a meth lab in a long time because they made pseudoephedrine behind the counter. You can only buy so much. And that really shut off the homemade meth and opened a huge market for imported methamphetamine. It's cheap and probably as big a problem or more than fentanyl here. 35% of our overdose deaths are a mix of methamphetamine and fentanyl. You mix the methamphetamine in so you can enjoy the fentanyl longer before you pass out, is what I'm told. Just fentanyl deaths, 27%, 28% roughly are just methamphetamine deaths. Methamphetamine's a bad thing. It can cause your heart to just speed up so fast it just stops pumping blood. It can cause strokes because it pops your blood pressure up. It can cause all kinds of things. And then other medications, about 10%. And that's other prescription pain meds. That's Benadryl. That's chlortrimeton. That's, just all kinds of different things that people have figured out. And then heroin. We had a bunch of heroin for a while, but we were having the highest number we had was, I think, 14 in a year of actual heroin deaths. It's almost all fentanyl and methamphetamine. And in 2023, I don't think we had any heroin that actually killed anybody, but cocaine is making a comeback. We've had 10 cocaine related deaths in 23, and we've had probably at least that many where it showed up. And now it's usually a mix. They're mixing, and sometimes they're mixing methamphetamine and cocaine together, which one's not strong enough to kill you on its own, I guess. So you add something more. But I don't get it. I think it's just whatever they have, and they're just mixing it together. And when people buy stuff on the street, you really don't know what you're getting. So every time's a new experience. And unfortunately, some people don't survive that to tell others about it. But there are websites you can go on where people do that kind of stuff and then post this long review of what it felt like and how great it was. And this is what you do. And there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. But open it to questions for a few minutes. Yes.
I noticed there were in 2023, there were 4,000 calls, death calls.
4,287. And like I said, I looked and there's probably another at least 1,500 hospital deaths that aren't included in that number. So
it said that the death certificates, there were only 1,200.
1,024.
So the medical examiner doesn't sign?
We sign everything that is accident or homicide, suicide, we have to sign. But natural deaths, if they are under a doctor's care, we try to get that doctor to sign. And so we've been getting more doctors to do that. And a lot of the problem with that is the funeral homes, and they just insist, no, they died in the emergency room, so you have to sign it by law. Well, no, we don't. They've been under this doctor's care for 40 years. They took him to the ER to pronounce them. That doctor knows their history for the last 40 years. We've never met this person. So we've been trying to get more attending doctors to sign, and that's been happening more as we work with the funeral homes. Yes.
So if you've got say hypothetically, you've got somebody who's relatively young, maybe in their 30s, and they pass away.
Yep.
Can the hospital request an autopsy? Can a family request an autopsy? Is there any cost to do that to the family?
We get that all the time where they'll want an autopsy. Our basic criteria is somebody's under 60 and doesn't have medical history. If the family wants an autopsy and it's something we're going to end up signing the death certificate, we do that, and then there's no cost. We started doing our own transportation about 3 years ago. There just were so many issues with the transports that we had. And we were able to get a couple vans, so we do our own transportation now. So that added another level when you're on call. Now you get to carry all these people out to the van and drive them here. But that's all. There's no cost for our autopsies to the families. There are some where they have a lot of medical history. We have a clear cause of death in the medical records. We will refer those to, there's a private autopsy group in Ozark. We'll refer those to them. We don't do private pay autopsies. Just, that's one of those things we don't want to get into, because then that question comes up. Well, so you just denied a medical examiner autopsy so you could get paid by the family to do it. And we don't want to get into that. So those cases that we have a clear cause of death, but the family just really wants an autopsy. But somebody young without any significant history, we're going to bring them in. If they die in the hospital, we're still bringing them in for an exam. I think we've got 2 from this weekend that died in the hospitals, but we're bringing them in because, they're younger, they don't have history. So we need to determine what was going on with them. Yes.
On average, how long do guests stay in that morgue building?
We hope to get them out within 48 hours. We try to get them out within 24 hours. If we bring somebody in today, we hope to have the autopsy done and the family choose a funeral home and have them out by tomorrow. Sometimes it's the same day. We've had a few where we'll bring them in at 11 o'clock, do the autopsy at 1, and the funeral home picks them up at 3. We like those because we get a lot of long-term. There are a lot of people who do not have any idea what to do about funeral home or cremation versus burial. I saw when I came in yesterday and brought that body in from the scene, I saw there was an open spot in the back corner, the cooler, and this guy had been there for 3 weeks, and we'd been talking to the family. They just couldn't decide, and he was gone. Funeral home picked him up. So I was excited that he finally got to go to a funeral home. But we've had people there for a month or 6 weeks that the family just won't do anything, and then they finally do. But people just don't have any idea what they want to do. So I always say it's a hard subject, but think about it, talk about it, let somebody know what you want to do, and hopefully you know where you want that done. We always tell people, we're not going to tell you use this funeral home because we can't do that, but we always tell them call multiple places, because for just a basic cremation, which has gotten a lot more popular, $795 is the entry level here, but there are places in town that'll charge $2,500 for that same exact basic cremation. So we always tell them, check with a lot of places. Some families have used this funeral home for 6 generations. Great. Then that's what they're good with. And if they can afford that, more power to them. And they'll be happy with it, but others are barely scraping by. People don't have a final, final arrangement fund to do something. So, and I know even in my family, there was a sister that died and all of her kids and everybody's like, we can't do anything. We don't have any money. So I said, all right. Started calling around up there and said, okay, we'll take care of it. But yeah, it's just, we have a lot of trouble sometimes finding somebody to make those arrangements. But optimally, if they know where they want them to go, they're out within 24 to 48 hours, barring weekends and holidays. That slows it down a little, but on an average Monday, we'll have 4 or 5 cases. Last weekend, we had a couple people out, so it's Dr. Duff and and I brought 7 in over the weekend, that last weekend. So we only have 4 this weekend, I think. So, yes.
What spots do you have for,
We have 12 autopsy carts. When a body comes in, we put them on an autopsy table and then put them in the cooler. And then once they're done, they go on another stretcher to be ready to be released. But we have room in there for, in the main cooler, probably 20 or so carts. And then we have racks for another 20. There's space. We have some other portable racks we can put in there. We can hold 100 bodies in our main cooler if we had to in a disaster. Our second cooler can probably hold about 30 if we had to, with the extra racks that we have to put in there. And then we also got a grant when we first moved in there for that trailer outside is refrigerated and that can hold up to 27. So we have more capacity than any office in the state. And so we have had other counties send people here just because they didn't have the space. And we haven't charged for that. Just, we have the space. So as long as they're doing the transportation, we've done that if we weren't overcrowded ourselves.